Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Vitality Project. We're here on Friday night. I'm Bob Weathers, and I'm here with my guest. I'm very happy for you to join me. I'm happy to introduce Angela Macleod. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Bob. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you. It's good to have you back again. And our topic has been one that we've talked about in different ways, but it's the focus tonight to look at the requirements, in this case, requirements that we placed on ourselves. And for those that have had a chance to review today's post, we have an exercise where we link together qualities that we value about ourselves and then the flip side of those, what Jung would call the shadow side of those. And the exercise was, how do you feel about the parts of yourself that aren't your shiniest, happiest parts, the parts that we don't like showing to the world, that we don't even like acknowledging ourselves, and looking at those as possible sources of stress for us. That is to say that if the example I gave is if I'm kind-hearted, well, what about when I'm not feeling so kind-hearted? Can I allow for that? Can I allow for, basically, for my humanity? So I wanted just to talk into that just for a few minutes tonight with you, Angela, your reflections, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about this idea of how we place sometimes expectations or requirements on ourselves that are quite impossible to live up to, and that really become a source of suffering. And for those of us that are prone to addictive behaviors, can actually become a trigger for addictive behaviors.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit that I got pretty confused doing the process. Actually, the mapping. Part of it might be because I've been doing I've been working with a coach and kind of using some other style of inquiry work, and then I sort of rushed today. I was trying to make the map, that you described, and I think I interpreted differently the part about putting in the circle qualities that best represent me. Like I didn't hear that as what I value, the qualities that I value about myself. I heard that as, how would anybody, Angela's this way, Angela's that way, these are the best ways that we could describe Angela. So it was a mixture, and then when I did the opposite, when I did the line outside and I put what's the opposite of that, they weren't really even, some of them were definitely kind of shadow, like you said, like this is also who I am. But some of it was just not how I don't even relate to it. But it was an interesting process because I went back to the title, which was, the inner requirements that become sources of stress. So I kept pausing and thinking, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And then I just thought, okay, what are the inner requirements here out of any of this, positive or negative, And then I even realized that some of what I call or we relate to as positive or values, qualities about myself that I value, also I can turn them into stressful inner requirements, So even though I don't know if I was doing it properly, doing the exercises you intended, I think I was able to really connect with, these inner requirements and the stress, and that's really the point, isn't it? To
Thank you.
discover those.
Thank you. I'm very close to the canvas on exercises like this, and this one was adapted pretty much verbatim from the Mind Body workbook. And because I had a certain intention, I wrote into this and I did the exercise accordingly. And it just listening to you, Angela, it clarifies for me how I could further clarify the exercise, because I don't think there's any certain right way to do it. The language I use is probably pretty close to the original authors, Stanley Block and 𝗖𝗄𝗡, and I think it could stand to be clarified. I like very much hearing from you, and I particularly appreciate you're staying open to see what comes up for you. It occurs to me as I listen to you that as I was writing this and reflecting on the book and trying to find a way to translate this into a practical exercise, that there was something I was doing with it that I don't think was what the authors intended, and I want to own up to that. I don't want to put this on them. And so I was actually kind of in my mind thinking of, well, the inside of the circle might be like I mentioned here, might be more desirable qualities, but I didn't use that language in the exercise. So of
Yeah.
course you'd be confused by that. And I own up to that. I think in my mind, it kind of converted almost to the way that Jung talks about our persona that we show to the world and our shadow that we want to hide from the world. But that wasn't in the language of the exercise. And my apologies for the lack of clarity.
Okay.
We live and learn, and this is an example of it. I love what you did with it, which was looking at whether it's a negative quality or a positive quality, any of these across the whole spectrum. Do I turn these into expectations that it must be this way or else? And the or else can be I'll be miserable, I may feel ashamed, and so on it goes. So I'd love to just talk into it, however it went for you. And note to self that if and when we revise this book, I'd like to clarify this exercise.
Yeah. So, well, maybe I'll just use an example.
Sure, that'd be great.
Just within my close circle of friends, I see a positive value that I have. I like using personal examples because I just feel like I feel like I'm not talking just theory. I'm just really sharing more of what my experience is. And within my close circle of people, I feel like I'm available a lot. You know, like not that I spend a lot of time with them, but I feel available and willing to be there for them, and that I don't, and that I'm also wary of asking for too much. Like that could even be based in a feeling of not wanting to be a burden. You know, so I was just kind of looking at that configuration, and so just within the idea of what in that particular, those characteristics, what in that am I placing a requirement on myself, and how is that causing me stress? So that's kind of the way I started working with this concept. And I realized that there's times when I'm available, when I make myself available to others, when actually I don't have the energy to be available. You know, and so then I end up, that's stressful or that's draining for me. And then other times when I really feel the need, I want connection, or I'm wanting, you know, I need help, or I want my friends, and I'm afraid to ask for it because, oh, I know they're too busy. Something like that comes up. And so then I end up putting myself in the stress of being alone or feeling isolated. You know, so that's just one of the things that I looked at. There's a whole bunch more, but I found,
I was aware.
go ahead.
I was aware in writing this post, and I reviewed it before we came on tonight, is that one of the things I noted was that it's more and more fine-tuned, isn't it? And as I'm listening to you right now, this is really looking at the kind of the implications of what we can do, and it can be quite subtle. I really like what the example you just gave, because it gives flesh and blood to the way it can go for all of us. And the next person might have a different content, but this thing of things that could be seen as values for us, you being available for other people, and that could be seen as virtues because there's a generosity. And I know you to know that this is true, you know, is a beautiful thing, is that it can turn into a millstone around our necks if we're not careful, taken to extreme. And sometimes it sneaks up on us. And I think it takes a fine-tuned awareness, and you definitely have it, to be able to recognize that amidst these things that we value, there can be the shadow side. I'll tell you what came up for me as I was listening to you. I recently had a conversation with someone that was talking about wanting to appear hip or cool to his friends, but then it means that it actually kind of binds him up. He can't ask questions for fear of exposing that he's ignorant. He can't be vulnerable because that's not cool. He better not be too spontaneous. And he happens to be a musician, and so it really, this thing of being cool or being hip ends up getting in the way of his being creative. And it's just all in there together. And that's really what we're talking about doing, is kind of teasing out these threads to see what's going on that's leading to my distress? And I don't think this stuff is all that obvious in our day-to-day lives. It takes really reflecting. I know you do that. I so appreciate and respect this about you. But we're inviting others to do the same thing with the exercise today, even though the exercise needs to be clarified. I grant that. Is that might there be value to look at how it is that I take qualities, whether they're qualities I value or don't value, and turn those into these expectations, or what we've been talking about. We turn those into requirements, and we find ourselves really painted into a corner.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could share another example.
I'd love to share another example. Yeah.
Well, one of the qualities that I really like about myself is that I've kind of courageously launched into studies that are just that I love, things that I love to study and do with regards to teaching Qigong and mindfulness facilitation and some other kinds of work. The shadow side of that is that I really don't want to be in business by myself, for myself. So the kind of work that I've chosen and that I've, gotten a lot of education around it, it's not part of the mainstream. It's not just something I can go out and get a job doing. And I need to make an income. So there's something about that, being a maverick, or just following my bliss. I mean, it still remains to be seen. Maybe eventually, I will be able to make enough income doing what I love. I do make some income doing what I love, and I feel healthier by doing what I love. And I'm barely eking by financially. And so the shadow side is kind of not listening to the part of me that just doesn't want to be in business, to run a business. I don't have that full range of skill set to do it by myself. You know all of this about me. And so I'm kind of grappling with that right now. And I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'm working with that. But having this kind of bringing to awareness the shadow side of things that are the positives is helping me to see that. And a friend of mine just simply said, well, what if you listen more to that voice that says, I don't want to do this? I had interpreted that voice that said, I don't want to be in business by myself as, come on, Angela, everybody has to do things that they don't enjoy. You can do it. You have the ability. So there was a kind of not listening to something that's important in my nature. And it caused a lot of stress.
I did. You make me think of something, and it's come up since we even spoke earlier today about this topic. Is once a year I go back and I review. I'm in a private practice doing recovery coaching, and so virtually all that I do is working with individuals either in early recovery, helping to establish that, and or working with family members to help support them, and I lead groups and so on like that. So this is what I do. Well, once a year I do kind of a review of the year, specifically, and I hadn't done it until today. I usually do it closer to early January, and I just have been busy. I go back and I review the referrals that I got to my private practice over the last year, and I track where they came from. It's just a way for me to kind of an inventory. Like some people inventory the stock on their shelves, I inventory how that's gone for me. And I'm grateful for all the referrals. I'm grateful for all of them. But what I was struck by, you'll see how this relates to what you're saying. It just came up for me as I was listening to you, is that something I enjoy is connecting with you, Angela, and other friends who are peers of mine in this work. And so some of them are therapists. Some of them are, they come from all walks of life. It's just that they're the people I enjoy spending most of my time with are doing some kind of work, nominally in healing, and oftentimes around recovery. And there's all kinds of ways of drumming up business. There's all the online things. There's all the Well, in non-COVID circumstances, there's, university-based workshops, and I can just go down the list. There's all kinds of things, and I've done a lot of all of them over the course of 40 years. But I was very struck today when I looked at the referrals that I've gotten over the course of the year, that the majority, I want to say the vast majority, that's not quite accurate. The majority were people that I like meeting with. And so they weren't from going out and beating the pavement or knocking on doors. It was organic. It was organic from conversations like you and I have, and like you have with your the gentleman you were just referring to, and the same for me. And it's gratifying for me to know that, because that ends up being a good fit for me. There's some things that are not such a good fit for me. I mean, that I'm not a social media kind of guy. I kind of missed that developmental epic in my life. And if it wasn't for Jason, my partner here at the Vitality Project, I'd be really behind the 8 ball. And I'm really grateful, because he does digital marketing, and he's been very, very helpful. And we have a balance that way. But it's kind of like you're saying, there are things that I really like to do and feel like that they feed me and I'm good at them. And there's other things that either they don't feed me or I'm not particularly good at them. And I think what you're saying is, let's find what feeds you. And if you need to have somebody, as like you say, you don't want to work alone. I don't work alone. I work with Jason. That you have somebody who can pick up the other, and that there's be a complementarity. But it's very helpful for me, and it's very kind of a very dry-eyed systematic analysis. I look through at the end of the year because I don't know what to predict, and it turns out that I'm involved in lots of different kinds of marketing, but the kind that's been the most generative in terms of my private practice work, which is the bulk of my how I keep the roof over my head, is developing organic relationships. I'm very struck by that. And in some ways, it's actually growing stronger that way. It's not there's a trend towards more of that, not less of that. I'm very struck by that. It's friends, it's fellow therapists, it's people I respect. And I'm sure that will morph over time, but that really informs me, like you're saying, for you to know what it is you want to do. And if I was trying to force myself into a square peg, let's say, and I've certainly done plenty of that in my life, it doesn't feel good, and I'm not even sure it's that generative. It's like let's listen to the voice that says, like you're saying, the voice that says, I don't really want to work alone. I think your friend is right. Let's listen to that. For me, there's certain things that I don't want to spend a lot of time doing. I listen to that and pay attention to some statistics at the end of the year, and I go, good, okay, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
It's great to hear your experience. Your example.
It's hot off the press. Literally, it was this afternoon. I finally got a chance to sit down and do that, and it was very illuminating. What I will do is I'll actually write an analysis, a summary of it for myself. It helps to kind of set in a clear language not only where I've been this last year, but where I want to head. And so it becomes a very important formative exercise for me. And so I'm nearly there. I just want to sit down and kind of write out what I just told you. And then that sets the tone for this next year for me, for the most part, Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's something that's implied in your approach tonight, and I wanted to comment on it.
Okay.
Aside from the content that we've shared, there's a kindness and a self-compassion that I feel like is implied in what you're suggesting. And I do want to name that for both of us, is that I know it's a high value for you. Certainly is for me. It's centermost to my own personal recovery from addiction. And I feel like, if there be an opposite or an antidote, let's say, to these requirements, it would be something in the vein of self-care, self-compassion, generosity towards ourselves, listening to ourselves, listening to our hearts.
I appreciate you pointing that out. That is relatively new in my life, that to have more kindness, within myself, for myself. And I think maybe in the past I might have seen that as indulgent, or I don't know. I don't. It's not even that it was very conscious, but but I notice the more that I am able to really listen and find that kindness for myself, I feel more kind to other people, more compassionate with other people as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not an overindulgence as far as I can tell.
No. I really like you're tying it into the relational dimension, Angela. You and I have both known people, and in some ways we've been these people. We've both known people that have a critical nature, or
Mhm.
have an impatience about them, or are kind of taskmasters. I mean, I just think of different examples of how this can go. And I don't know that you and I've ever spoken of it. It's never been that apparent to me from childhood on that if somebody is all over my back for something, that they might struggle with this themselves. I understand that
Yeah,
abstractly, and I've
yeah.
heard this from fairly young on. But if somebody is really, really cracking the whip, it's hard to, I'm stuck with my experience, and it's
Uh-huh.
hard for me to imagine that, my goodness, what's it like to be inside that person's psyche if they do this to themselves? And
Uh-huh.
I think there's lots of ways that people get to a place of being the when cracking the whip, but I think oftentimes it is kind of the opposite of what
Mm.
you just said. It's the lack of mercy they extend to others is reflected in the lack of mercy they extend to themselves. And just a
Mhm.
few times in adulthood, including in recent years, I'll have a glimpse into somebody's, psychology calls it their harsh superego, just an incredibly powerful self-judgment that
Uh-huh.
manifests as them being incredibly judgmental of others. And then you
Mm.
get this little glimpse and you realize there's the vulnerability right there. It's like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
poor person is doing with themselves what they do to others. It's a mess.
Mhm.
And I want to be careful about pointing that, because I've been extremely critical of myself,
Mhm.
and can also be shaming and blaming and all the rest of
Mhm.
others. I like how you put it. They go hand in hand. They go
Mhm.
hand in hand. The extent to which I can exercise self-compassion is the extent to which I can grace you with that same kind of compassion, and
Mm.
vice versa. You're
Yeah.
you're being compassionate towards me becomes something that helps me to learn how to love myself better.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was one other thing that arose to my attention as I was playing with the map, and the way that
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
that I was either not understanding or understanding the exercise, and I noticed right off sort of this setup of a polarity, or an opposite, because you even said, what's the opposite,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
have these
yeah, yeah,
qualities, what's the opposite?
yeah,
And so here I am looking at these things where there's two opposites or seeming opposites. And at one point I got confused because I thought, well, in some cases, this opposite, this end of the spectrum actually can be of value to me, but
mm,
other times it's not. And the same
mm,
thing, what I thought was a
yeah,
positive quality can at some points not be. Like I can work
yeah,
alone. I'm good at finding my own pace. Um, and I'm really following my heart, doing what's really important, that I think is really important to me, and hoping I can make this into work in the world. And the opposite being, here I am alone, and
yeah,
I don't have, there's certain skills that I'm just not able to develop yet, etc.
yeah,
So so there's the positive of being in touch with what I know I want to do in the world, this work that I'm
yeah,
developing. But then the flip side of pouring so much of my energy into that is that I'm alone. I'm doing it by
yeah,
myself.
yeah.
And then I have also this sort of uncovered for me. I think I'm going off on a
Mm,
tangent, but it was very exciting. This
mm,
kind of uncovered for me that I've had this unconscious perception that I don't work very well with other people, because I
mm,
have my own way, my own style. I know what I want to do, blah, blah,
mm,
blah. And what I'm finding out is that I've been changing, and I do
mm.
like to work with other people. I mean, I'm putting it kind of in black and white terms, but and I have been collaborating with some other people, but it's dawning on me how much I enjoy that. And I've been developing skills that allow me to now be collaborative and not feel stressed about it,
Mm,
And
mm,
so I see this new direction emerging,
mm, mm.
So I think I threw a couple things together in there, but that idea of looking at opposites, you know, that they're not necessarily only bad or good. It's not like I have this quality and it's great, and the opposite is a bad quality. You know, so it's a very interesting exercise
Yeah.
you laid out.
I love what you're talking about. Different responses, and we'll wind down in just a moment.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
there's a fluidity, isn't there?
Mhm.
And as soon as we set up any continuum, much less put things in opposition, we've got ourselves on thin ice. It's just, I was just talking with somebody earlier today in a coaching session that psychology really looks at things typically on, they call it a continuous model versus a discrete model. Continuous would be it flows, it's fluid. Discrete means it's a discrete yes or no, black or white type of thing. And very little in life is in black and white, at least in the realm of human psychology. I'll leave it to engineers and computer scientists to talk about X's and O's and pluses and zeros and so on, but that's not the way the human psyche operates for the most part. And so there's an artificialness to any setup like that. I'm aware of it when I write exercises and try to create, and I even use the language of opposition. It's like, well, not really, not really. And you're sharing that. I appreciate you talking, and I really like how you're talking about how it is that even amidst something that might be undesirable, we can find that which is desirable, and vice versa, or whatever way we want to frame that. And so even within a single dimension, much less along a continuum, any single dimension reveals in its depths so much. It reminds me of the translation of the 𝗖𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗃, where Stephen Mitchell says, if good happens, good. If bad happens, good. The sense that it's all there, and that feels truer, at least to me, and it sounds like to you too. It feels truer to my experience than do any of these kind of. Well, you know, we're talking about requirements tonight. We just want to be careful about putting a cookie cutter on reality. It doesn't fit reality. Our lives are like rivers. They're not cookies to be cut.
That's a good way to put it. Well,
any final comments for you, and we'll wind down.
Yeah, sure. My final comment here is that I really enjoyed the process, even though I didn't think I understood it. I enjoyed, and what I realized about just being willing and looking introspectively and engaging brought things to the surface. And then I just went back to that title, which was inner requirements that we place on ourselves that become stressful. And so then I just looked at all of it, and I just looked, where is there a requirement here that I'm feeling stressed about, whether the trait was positive or negative. And so it became really complicated, but then I just sat back and I thought, this is really simple. Where's the stress? You know, and so I really enjoyed the process.
I appreciate your working with it, and it's kind of it's not yet perfected, and yet you worked with it, you know, and found value in it, and you most often do, and I'm grateful for that. I guess even kind of the medium is the message. The way that we work with these exercises themselves give us a chance to be flexible. I really encourage those that have watched and heard us tonight, or will be reviewing this in the future, to try this exercise and adapt it as you have, Angela, in a way that's useful for you. And the wish would be that we could open ourselves to being kinder to our many parts. I'm really hoping that might be the case for those that are listening. You certainly are an exemplar of that, my dear, and working it as we both are, every day, every week, just gradually making progress. So thank you. Thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate you being with me, Angela. I wish you a safe and warm evening and weekend, okay? And I look forward to seeing you again here soon, okay? Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks so much. Good night. Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye, Angela. Bye-bye.
Bye.